Good morning. In my third and final video on the theme of Army Commanders Conference, which concluded recently in Delhi, in this video I will discuss the global and the regional security scenarios as they impact on India. So let me start with two figures. The Biden administration has sought $106 billion from the US Congress to support two regional wars, one in Ukraine and the other Israel-Hamas, as well as to provide additional military assistance to Taiwan. Then there is a news that a congressional panel has sought additional money for the US military to be able to fight China and Russia simultaneously, which I think is a preposterous proposition. But the underlying theme in all this is what the American analysts have been saying for quite some time, that the world has entered a new Cold War. So we have a global power, America, talking about a vision which is the new Cold War in a fragmented world. The world is not whole in this new Cold War. And this they have defined very clearly in a phrase which they call small yard high fence, meant specifically for China, because they know China is the only country which has the capability to compete with America in the entire artificial intelligence ecosystem and emerging technologies. And it has deep pockets to do so. After all, the Chinese GDP today is $18 trillion compared to America's, which is $23 trillion. So instead of taking the challenge of competing with China, the Americans want to contain and constrain China's further rise, so that it doesn't leapfrog into the fourth industrial revolution. And this they are trying to do by denial of advanced chips, advanced processors, which is 7 nanometers and below to China. So this is the vision that they have. The world is divided, new Cold War has come, and this is what the Americans tell us. Let's go to the other figure. At the recently concluded third Belt and Road Forum in China, Chinese President Xi Jinping, he announced $107 billion over 5 years for the next phase of Belt and Road Initiative. Now this figure is exactly the figure that he had announced in 2017 at the first Belt and Road Forum. So this criticism of the West that China has lost steam, China has lost interest in the BRI because of its failing economy is totally unfounded. What the Chinese have done is that they have now changed the approach a bit, which again Xi Jinping gave out as small yet smart projects to be taken. I will explain this in a while. Now, as we know that Belt and Road Initiative is about connectivity, it is about development, it is about prosperity, and it talks about one world. So this is the global vision of the second global power. Then there is a third global power, which is Russia, which is what the Indian analysts don't seem to understand, even the top military leaders, that given the natural resources, if they only understood Russia well, they would know that Russia's geopolitical importance will not go down in the times to come, but actually it will go up. But that is a different subject. So we have this third global power, Russia, which also has a global vision, which was spelled out by President Putin in 2012, when he said that Russia needs to pivot to Asia, because it is in Asia that 2/3 of Russia lies. And this pivot to Asia was to be done in his vision that the EEU, which is the Eurasian Economic Union, should be made into Greater Eurasia by using Far East as the gateway to Asia. This is Putin's vision. As we know, the EEU comprises of countries Russia, Belarus, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan. And as far as Greater Eurasia, where he wants to reach, not for military means, not for fighting, but again connectivity and development and trade and commerce. They are ASEAN, India, Pakistan, the Arab world and Iran. That is his vision. Aware of this vision, in my assessment, when Xi Jinping came to power 1 year later in 2013, so before he announced the BRI in Kazakhstan in October of 2013, in March of the same month he travelled to Russia first, where he met up with the president and he gave a talk at the Moscow Institute of International Relations on the subject of community of shared future for mankind, resting on 3 pillars of GDI, Global Development Initiative, GSI, Global Security Initiative, and GCI, Global Civilization Initiative. Now, these 3 initiatives are those pillars on which his whole thinking was resting. He wanted to confabulate with Putin on this subject, and he also wanted to brainstorm his idea with the Russian analyst. So there is something of this brainstorming session must have contributed positively to his making the announcement the same year in Kazakhstan. Now, as far as these 3 are concerned, GDI, GSI and GCI, the world got to know them much later. And the whole idea was that they are very important, but Xi Jinping announced the GDI first in 2021 and then he announced the GSI in 2022 and the GCI in 2023. The whole idea was that those nations which have not joined the BRI straight away, but wish to align with the thinking of the Chinese, should consider these 3 initiatives. So the point to make here is that the vision, the global vision of Russia and China, they are completely aligned. And they are about development, prosperity, BRI as well as EEU, later to become Greater Eurasia. This is the vision. So now we have 2 visions. One vision, the new Cold War vision, being led by a global power America, and then we have the other vision of peace, prosperity, partnership. Partnership is important, the world. Why it is important is, it is important to understand that there is a partnership that is the best that can happen between Russia and China. For the simple reason that when you have global powers, 2 global powers, they don't get into a military alliance. As a lot of analysts in the West keep speculating when there will be a military alliance between China and Russia, it will never happen. For the simple reason that global powers have a global vision, which means that they have the capability to exercise what they are thinking about the world. They can influence the events anywhere in the world, and they have a military capability certainly to defend their own territorial integrity. So what is the need for a military alliance? So the best that these 2 countries have reached is, these 2 major powers have reached is a no-limit partnership. Therefore, in my assessment, and I think this is something that the Indian analysts should consider, the 42 times that Xi has met with Putin, one of the primary things the 2 would be discussing is the progress on their visions which are aligned. The vision of BRI and the vision of Greater Eurasia. Now, having given this as a context, as the big picture, let us move on to the 3rd Belt and Road Forum, which concluded in China recently. Four important things were said by Xi Jinping there. Most of them were missed out in India. And President Putin also made a very important contribution there. And of course, we know that President Putin was the guest of honor at the BRI. A very foolish criticism, which has again come out from the West, and it is seconded by the Indian analysts, is that look at the third Belt and Road Forum. Only 23 heads of government came. Whereas in the second Belt and Road Forum held in 2019, there were 37 heads of government. Well, it is very obvious. Between 2019 and 2023, the world has changed with what the Americans have done. It is more aligned with this side or the other side. So if you see these 23 heads of government, and of course 140 countries were represented at the third Belt and Road Forum, you will find the global south there. And I think by any yardstick, it was a complete success. Now let me give out why it was a success. Number one, she spelled out Global Artificial Intelligence Governance Initiative. Now this is the fourth initiative he has spelled out since the BRI was introduced, and this is what the small yet smart projects will be all about. That means now they are moving to science and high-end technology, where the Chinese intend to help countries which are on board BRI at different stages of progress. Some would need the physical infrastructure still. Then some would need the third industrial revolution. And there would be some which would want to come into the artificial intelligence, which is the fourth industrial revolution. Let me explain this. Now, when we talk of the third industrial revolution, the Chinese have done a lot. In fact, they have accomplished that. It has three basic things. It is about fiber optic cables. Today, they compete in fiber optic cables with the Americans and the best in the world. And this was one of the key results areas that they had listed in their Made in China 2025 program. Then it is submarine cables. The Chinese have laid a lot of submarine cables. And the third is the Beidou global satellite system, where many are aware that they have 45 satellites part of this constellation. And a key thing which is not there in the GPS, but it is there in Beidou, is the two-way beaming. What this means is that in areas, remotest of areas, where the ground stations are not available, the beam can come and straight away it can go to the receiver. The sender and the receiver can straight away do the two-way beaming. It is a big thing. That means as far as 5G connectivity is concerned, which is the last mile connectivity, in the third industrial revolution, they have achieved, not only they are the first ones to roll out 5G, Huawei 5G, they have achieved some great results in it, two-way beaming. Now, as far as the fourth industrial revolution is concerned, which is what this initiative was about, to take at the highest level of technology. In that, as we are aware, it is about artificial intelligence, it is about blockchain, it is about cloud. So the Chinese will be setting up cloud services in the countries on a partnership basis. And it is about data, setting up data centers in partnership. Now, when I say partnership, what the Chinese have done is that any technology, when we talk of technology, let's say we talk of 5G or we talk of 4G, there is something unique about it. There is something called a standard. So the first class companies, they are called the first class companies, they set the standards. Because when you set the standards, that means then without your thing, your standards, the interoperability will not be there. Then you have the services. It is said that the second class companies, they set up the services, and the third class companies, they do the products. So what the Chinese have come up with the idea is that They will set the standards, and thereafter the rules, regulation and norms, they will work in partnership with the host country. That means they will help the host country, let's say in artificial intelligence, in data collection, algorithm designs, technology development, technology production, and then the applications finally. Now I am talking looking at 2030, 30 as the next, so many years, what will happen? For example, artificial intelligence, artificial AI experts already tell us that generative AI, which has come in a big way, in the next 3 to 5 years, we will see the LLMs, the large language models, they will create what is being called artificial intelligence assistants. This is interesting. What this means is that in all fields, let's say in medicine, what will be an artificial intelligence assistant? His job will be that when the doctor sees a patient, the assistant also is going through all the literatures of various cases across the world. So once the doctor has seen the patient, he has to refer to the assistant who will provide him with all the options to choose from. So certainly by 2030, the Chinese will be able to take this generative AI and help these countries with artificial intelligence assistants as well. So this is the big format that we are looking at. Now, the second thing that Xi Jinping spoke about was green development. This is a big challenging thing, and they are leaders in this. They are leaders in solar panels. They are leaders today in electric vehicles, and they are leaders in batteries, whether it is lithium ion battery, and they are also doing a lot of research now in sodium ion batteries. Now sodium ion batteries will be cheaper but give the same performance as the lithium ion batteries. So the point to make here is that they have such a lead today that anything which will be used anywhere in the world which concerns green development will have some Chinese component in it. That is what we are talking about. Now the third thing he mentioned was interconnectivity. Again, taking interconnectivity to an entirely different level. And he specifically mentioned the flagship project, which is the China-Europe Railway Express. This is the flagship project mentioned by Xi Jinping. And they can accomplish this, railways, because today China has the world's largest high-speed rail network, with these rails going at a speed of 350 kilometers per hour. And for the people who are not aware, in June of 2021, they successfully created and they experimented, tested and showed what is being called a maglev train. Maglev is magnetic levitation. A train which will not move on the tracks, which means it will not have friction there at all, but move above the tracks by a magnetic field. And the speed that they have demonstrated of this maglev train is 600 kilometers per hour. And what they have said is that by year 2025, they would have accomplished 6 routes. So think what they can do for the BRI nations by 2030. So these are the points which were made by, and of course the fourth point Xi Jinping mentioned was that a secretariat also needs to be created for the BRI. I mean, after all, today there are 140 nations, global south nations, all the African continent, 54 nations, they are on board BRI. Most of all the nations except India and Bhutan today in South Asia, they are on board BRI. So a secretariat, he said, will be required. So these are the points that he made. Each of them is a distinctive point that needs to be thought about. Then President Putin made a very important point where he spoke about the Northern Sea route, because from the Arctic to the Pacific, this will create the shortest shipping sea lane from Europe to East Asia through the Bering Strait. And this is what he said that they are focused on, and this is where the Chinese are helping them a lot. Chinese are putting in a lot of money there, and President Putin announced that by 2024 they will have ice class cargo ships on this route around the year. And as we know that in 2024 Russia will have the presidency of BRICS. So this whole northern route will gain more momentum. In fact, this whole thing, this Arctic, the connection of the Arctic through the Bering Strait, this is coming up as for a great power contestation. This is a very important route because according to one analyst, and he does make sense, in case of a war, if China is constrained in South China Sea or Indian Ocean region, then the way to reach them, Europe, will be through this route. And as far as the Russians are concerned, their Arctic region will get developed. So this is a big thing, which the two nations will do together. So this is the picture that we are looking at. The viewers can decide for themselves that is it still in speculation whether the world is between orders, or we can clearly see where the world is headed. In my assessment, you can clearly see where the world will be in 2030. Unless the Americans create more wars. That is a different matter. Come to India now. Let's look at the regional situation. But before that, India has decided, when Prime Minister Modi came to power, he came up with this Act East policy, which now has been changed to Indo-Pacific policy, Indo-Pacific strategy, completely aligned with the Americans. In fact, in November next month, the 2+2 is to be held in Delhi, where the American Secretary of State and Defense Secretary, they'll be coming here, and it is very obvious that they will be talking about the things that the Modi government had promised during Prime Minister's state visit in June to America. But that is a different subject. The key thing is that the operative thing of the Indo-Pacific strategy is Quad. Now please look at the Quad. The issue is that China is the world's manufacturing factory, and it has close to 150 nations which are its primary trading partners. So the Quad members, let's see what they are doing. The Prime Minister of Australia is scheduled to visit China next month. Obviously now he wants to mend ties with China, despite the AUKUS which was done. Then we have recently the Prime Ministers of China and Japan. They exchanged very warm greetings on the 45th year of their peace treaty. And then we know that Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, top diplomat, will be in Russia, in America tomorrow, meeting up with his counterpart and perhaps looking at the possibility of a meeting between Xi Jinping and Biden on the sidelines of the APEC in San Francisco. So the Americans are very keen that we need to build up the decoupling of the industrial supply chains will create havoc for the Americans. They are aware of that. So all these three Quad nations are talking with China, but India refuses to talk with China. And finally, China has also given up on India. And the three clear indications of that are, number one, Xi Jinping did not come to G20 and he did not even bother to call up Modi and explain his absence. Number two, at the recently concluded 20th round of military talks on the border issue, unlike the 19th round of talks where a joint statement was issued, this time no joint statement was issued. And China did not invite India for the third Belt and Road Forum. And now let me just connect this with what the American President Joe Biden said in June to CNN's Fareed Zakaria. He claimed that he had met Xi Jinping as many times as any global leader. And according to him, China is not expansionist. China does not want wars, but China wants a united China. And that is what Xi Jinping wants. And when we talk of united China, we are talking of Taiwan and we are talking of the Indian state of Arunachal Pradesh, which they call South Tibet. So I leave it at this. Because it is impossible for the Americans to start a fight in Taiwan. In South China Sea, it is absolutely impossible because they will gain nothing out of it. And if you cannot meet your war objectives, you don't go to war. Which is not the case of the state of Arunachal Pradesh. So this is the global scenario that India should look at. Now let me just look at the neighborhood, what's going on. As far as neighborhood is concerned, our closest partnership is today with Bhutan. Why? Because Bhutan is one country where we have our military training team. It has been there since the 60s. And that this is supposed to be a division's worth eventually when it builds up. And now we have the foreign minister, Bhutan. He was in China, we are aware, yesterday. He's met up with Wang Yi. Diplomatic relations are very likely to be established. This will lead to the border resolution, which means that our training team will have to come back. Then we have Maldives, where the president-elect has already said that all the military assets and troops of the Indians, his first priority is to see that they are no longer on his soil. So they will come back. Then we have Nepal, then we have Sri Lanka, Bangladesh. They all were there at the third Belt and Road Forum, and all of them made it very clear that their preference would always be with China. That China is the bigger party, they made it very clear, and they are looking at prosperity, and they are not really with India any longer. And you may please connect this with my first video, which was on the threats that India faces, and the second video, the wars that India needs to prepare for. Thank you so much.